Chris Brown just got hit with a verdict that no statement, fan campaign, or polished social media post can make disappear. A Los Angeles jury found him liable in the housekeeper dog attack case, and the award attached to that decision came to roughly $13 million. That is not a quiet legal loss. That is not some small private settlement hidden behind closed doors, because this decision came from a jury after Maria Avila, Brown's former housekeeper, alleged she was mauled by a large dog while working on his property. The courtroom has now delivered the one thing a celebrity crisis machine cannot fully control: a verdict with a number. Roughly $13 million now sits next to Chris Brown's name, and that number changes the entire story because a jury looked at the injuries, heard the arguments, weighed the defense, and still decided Brown carried liability. That is where the damage begins. This case was never only about a celebrity dog. It was about control, responsibility, and what happens when a working woman enters a superstar's property to do her job, only to leave with injuries that became part of the public record. Maria Avila was not there chasing fame or trying to attach herself to a music star, because according to the case, she was working as a housekeeper and taking out the trash when the attack happened. That detail cuts through the noise. A housekeeper was doing ordinary work on someone else's property. A large dog attacked her. She suffered serious injuries, and a Los Angeles jury has now placed responsibility on Chris Brown. That is the part Brown's side could not outrun. Celebrity lawsuits often get buried under arguments, fan wars, legal filings, and public relations spin, but this one ended with a clean number that people can understand right away. $13 million. That figure is now the receipt. It is the headline. It is the piece of the case that cannot be laughed off as a misunderstanding or brushed aside as another celebrity problem. What makes the verdict even more damaging is the defense Brown's side used at the beginning. They argued Avila provoked the dog. That was the move, and that move tried to shift the weight away from the owner of the property and onto the woman who said she was mauled while doing housework. The jury did not accept it. That rejection matters because the defense was not just a technical argument. It was a direct attempt to make Avila responsible for the danger she faced inside Brown's world. Once the jury sided against Brown, the blame shift collapsed. The case started to look less like a confusing accident and more like a superstar trying to push responsibility onto a working-class woman who had already suffered the injuries. That is why the verdict lands with such force. The financial hit is huge, but the moral stain is just as ugly because the picture is simple: a famous millionaire, a domestic worker, a violent attack, and a courtroom that decided the injured woman deserved a massive award. The receipts now show a legal outcome Brown cannot control. The injury photos made the case even harder to soften because TMZ had already circulated graphic images connected to the attack, giving the public a brutal look at what Avila said she went through. That is where the story became real. A phrase like dog attack can sound vague. The word injuries can feel distant. A civil lawsuit can sound like dry paperwork that only lawyers care about. Graphic photos change that. Once those images were in circulation, the case could no longer be treated like a small accident because the damage looked physical, harsh, and impossible to minimize with careful wording. That is what the jury had to weigh. Brown's problem is that the jury did not just see a celebrity defendant being sued. They saw a worker who entered his property and left with injuries serious enough to justify a roughly $13 million award. The number tells its own story. It says the harm was serious, the damage was real, and the jury did not see this as a tiny dispute inflated by attention around a famous name. This case came with consequences. Now Brown is in legal downfall mode on this issue because the verdict removed the fog that protected the debate before the jury came back. Before the decision, his side could argue the case was weak. His defenders could call the lawsuit opportunistic. Fans could insist there was still too much doubt. After the verdict, that posture changed. The question is no longer whether Avila had enough of a case to be heard, because the question now is how much damage this verdict creates from here. $13 million is more than a headline number. It becomes a legal weapon, one that can affect insurance questions, possible appeal strategy, and the way celebrity property owners think about animals on private grounds. It also affects public perception. Brown remains one of the most polarizing figures in music, which means every legal defeat lands on top of years of controversy, backlash, and public debate rather than landing in a clean, empty space. That is why this verdict hit instantly. For For people already critical of Brown, the decision reads like accountability catching up with him in another form, while his most loyal fans will try to frame it as another attack or another lawsuit targeting him. None of that changes the record. A court did not deliver a fan poll. It delivered a jury verdict, and that is exactly why the story creates such a serious problem for Brown. Fan loyalty can protect a celebrity in comment sections. It can push streams higher, flood timelines, and make criticism look louder than it really is. It cannot erase a jury award. The legal system has now placed a massive figure next to the attack, and that figure forces everyone to look harder at what happened on Brown's property. A housekeeper ended up mauled while taking out the trash at a celebrity mansion. That sentence alone is devastating. It does not make Brown look powerful or untouchable. It makes the environment around him look unsafe, and it turns the property into the center of a preventable disaster. Brown's side tried to argue provocation, yet the jury still came back with liability. That detail carries the whole case. Because she provoked the dog is not a small defense. It suggests the attack happened because of Avila's own actions, not because of the danger around her. The jury did not buy enough of that story to save Brown from liability. That was the courtroom door slamming shut. The blame game failed, and the people deciding the case looked past it. From that point forward, the case became bigger than a dog on a celebrity property because it became about what powerful people owe to workers who enter their homes. Housekeepers, cleaners, assistants, drivers, landscapers, maintenance staff, and security workers all step into private spaces where the owner controls the conditions around them. The worker does not control the gate. The worker does not control the animals. The worker does not set the safety rules. Inside someone else's home, the property owner carries that power. When something goes wrong inside that space, the law can follow the damage straight back to the person responsible for the property. That is exactly what happened here. Maria Avila entered this case as Brown's former housekeeper, while Chris Brown entered it as the superstar defendant. With the fame, money, and public machine behind him, by the end, the jury gave Avila the stronger legal position. That reversal is the sting. Brown may have the fans, the stages, the money, and the celebrity shield, but Avila had the injuries, the lawsuit, and the facts strong enough to convince a jury. Now she has the verdict too. That is why this case cuts deeper than ordinary celebrity drama, because it does not need leaked messages, club footage, secret calls, or social media chaos to make sense. The structure is plain. A worker said she was mauled at a celebrity home. Brown's side pushed back. The case reached a Los Angeles jury, and that jury awarded Avila roughly $13 million. Clean stories can be the most damaging. Brown now has to face the next phase, and the first unresolved piece is the possible appeal. His team could fight the outcome, challenge parts of the verdict, attack the size of the award, or argue that legal errors affected the result. That path remains open. As of the initial reporting, the exact breakdown of the $13 million award was not fully confirmed, which means the public still does not know how the number was divided between categories like medical damages, pain and suffering, lost income, emotional distress, or any possible punitive component. That breakdown matters. If part of the award is punishment style damages, the message becomes sharper because the jury would not just be compensating Avila, it would be warning Brown. Even without that confirmed breakdown, the size already sends a loud message. $13 million is not a casual amount. That kind of figure follows a defendant through every future headline, turning a complicated case into a phrase that sticks. Chris Brown does not simply lose a dog attack lawsuit. He gets hit with a $13 million verdict. And that version is the one people remember. For someone with Brown's long history of controversy, that phrase becomes gasoline thrown onto an image problem that was already burning. This is where the courtroom loss turns into a brand problem. Touring, partnerships, public appearances, and business relationships all run on risk calculations, and companies do not only ask whether a celebrity can sell tickets, they ask whether that celebrity brings chaos. A verdict like this raises that risk because it ties Brown not only to controversy, but to a major civil liability finding involving a domestic worker mauled on his property. There is no clean way to dress that up. The courtroom-style optics make it even worse, because a serious photo, a gavel graphic, a giant dollar figure, and the silhouette of a large dog tell the whole story before anyone reads a line. Superstar loses, housekeeper wins. Jury delivers a massive bill. That is a nightmare frame for Brown. The most damaging part is how easy the case is to understand, because nobody needs a law degree to grasp a dog attack, a worker getting hurt, and a jury saying the property owner is liable. Simplicity makes the verdict dangerous. Brown's defenders can still call the award too high. They can still say Avila was looking for money. They can still claim the jury leaned too far toward the plaintiff. Those arguments now sit underneath the official result. The jury already spoke, and that is the difference between internet defense and courtroom reality. Online, anyone can declare a celebrity. Misunderstood. In court, lawyers argue, evidence gets tested, injuries are weighed, and jurors make a decision. Here, they decided against Brown. That decision anchors the entire story. Now, the broader legal battle also exposes something uncomfortable about celebrity homes, because those properties are often presented like luxury bubbles sealed off by gates, guards, money, and status. Workers still go inside those bubbles. Every day, they clean the floors, take out the trash, maintain the yards, and move through the kitchens, garages, hallways, and back entrances that the public never sees. If an aggressive animal is on the property, the worker carries the real-time risk. When the worst happens, the celebrity cannot just point at the injured person and say they caused it. At least in this case, the jury did not let that argument win. That is the final nail in the blame-shifting strategy. The verdict says responsibility did not vanish because Brown is famous. It did not vanish because Avila was working inside a private home. It did not vanish because the attack happened behind mansion gates. Responsibility stayed attached to the property. That means it stayed attached to Brown. This is why the case becomes more than another celebrity lawsuit, because it is a public accountability moment with a huge price tag and no easy way to spin the outcome. Brown now has to carry the stain of this verdict while the unanswered questions continue circling. Will his team appeal? Will the award be reduced? Will Avila speak publicly? Will Brown respond directly? Will insurance cover part of it? Or does the fight become even more expensive behind the scenes? Those pieces remain unresolved. The core result is already locked in. A Los Angeles jury found Chris Brown liable. Maria Avila received an award of roughly $13 million. The defense that tried to frame her as the prevailed in front of the people who mattered most. That is the courtroom record. No fan base can rewrite it. The harsh truth is that Brown's side needed ambiguity to survive this cleanly, because they needed confusion, doubt, and enough gray area for people to say nobody really knew what happened. The verdict stripped that away. Now the story has a clear legal winner and a clear legal loser. Maria Avila walked out legally vindicated, while Chris Brown walked away with a $13 million problem and another ugly chapter attached to his name. The reason this moment will stick is simple. A person went to work, a person got hurt. A powerful man's property became the center of the damage, and a jury forced accountability into the open. That is why the verdict feels heavy. It is not only about money, it is about the cost of trying to dodge responsibility when the evidence has already pushed through the record. Brown's empire may still have fans, stages, streams, and defenders, but in this case, the jury did not care about the music or the fame. They cared about what happened to Maria Avila. After weighing it all, they made Chris Brown pay. That is the lesson sitting at the center of this verdict, because behind the mansion gates, behind the star power, and behind the defense strategy, the truth still had teeth. This time, those teeth came with a $13 million bill.